Hi, my name is Christopher Malcolm, and welcome to Movable Canvas, where we talk about cinema, arts, culture, and where those three things sometimes intersect. Today's episode is time for another hot take, or, well, cold take, in that what I'm about to discuss has been a long time in the works. The specific question for today: where have all the movie stars gone? Now, I know in the modern society, saturated with media, it may be tempting to think that, well, everybody's famous for at least a little bit these days. But real fame, I mean like movie star level fame, that kind of notoriety that has always been reserved for only a small chosen few, a star that burns so bright that it can be seen from galaxies away, that kind of stardom has begun to seem like a thing of the past. It's been so long since the world truly minted a new movie star that I kind of think that the younger generation may not fully understand what I mean, even with the term movie star. Everyone understands the concept of fame, of course. But if you're above a certain age, you know what I mean when I say that the prominence of the movie star in our cultural landscape used to just mean so much more. I mean, honestly, nothing really even compares to the level of cultural relevance as a movie star, or perhaps maybe a music legend or a famous sports star. But the movie star, that was rarefied air. When Clara Bow was called the It Girl, it became a term that's still around 100 years later. When MGM claimed to have more stars than they have in the sky, it was more than just a marketing slogan. It was a fact. When the two Toms and Julia ruled the roost in the 80s and 90s, all studio needed to do was put a picture of that person's face on a billboard and they'd have a potential blockbuster. Fame used to really, mean something. Now, before I get into how the playing field has shifted throughout the years, let's first define what I mean when I say fame. Because I live here in Los Angeles and work in entertainment, I've had occasion throughout my life to encounter all levels of famous. From those who make the local news, to those who are on a short-lived TV show, to those who have multiple Academy Awards and live in the mansion on the hill. As I said before, social media, which I'll dig into deeper in a second, has made it so that anyone can kind of build a certain level of following, millions even if they play it right. But even that doesn't approach the level of fame that movie stars used to possess. The way I always used to think about it is that you know you're truly famous when you can walk into any home around the globe and have it almost guaranteed that at least someone in that house knows your name. The people living there may not like you, but whether they want to or not, they have heard your name. Take Tom Cruise, for example. Whether or not you like him as an actor or not, it's virtually impossible that you've never even heard of him. You could be living in a remote community at the far end of the globe in a small hut cut off from society, and still a very strong chance that if I said Tom Cruise, you'd say, "Oh, you mean Maverick from Top Gun?" Such is the level of fame that it extends beyond the boundaries of a particular fan group. It becomes part of the world's collective knowledge. You stop being, just someone who acted in a few movies and start becoming a Jeopardy question. That is what I mean by fame. And Hollywood used to churn them out like hotcakes. Florence Lawrence, better known as the Biograph Girl, is widely considered to have been the first true movie star. She came about in the early 1900s and 1910s working for Biograph Studios, and her ascension to fame was really the result of a concerted effort in the early days of motion pictures to actively create a marketing asset that could bring more audiences out to the theaters. By the way, if I use terms like marketable asset a lot throughout this essay, it's because the story of the movie star is as much about business and economics as it is about any individual performance or talent. Take note of her branding as well. She wasn't marketed as Florence Lawrence, she was known as the Biograph Girl. The studio is saying to the audience, "Come see our films because we have the Biograph Girl." This is the kind of face we are offering to audiences. But the studio was making itself the star. Lawrence's own fame was somewhat short-lived, but in building her up, the studio was beginning to train the audience early to go to films not only because they liked a particular genre, but also because they wanted to see their favorite star. Eventually, audiences began to self-select their favorite faces. When Clara Bow becomes the It Girl, it's partially a function of the studio building up her fame, but also, if you've ever seen a Clara Bow film, you'll understand why that flapper era star became so popular. She is possibly one of those first in a long line of starlets that were just so uniquely free in themselves on screen, so filled with charisma, and so unlike anyone else you'd ever seen on screen that you just knew that they had it. What exactly it is hard to explain, but movie stars throughout time, from Audrey Hepburn to Denzel Washington, have had it. That unquantifiable quality that just kind of sets them apart. It's a quality that makes your eyes gravitate to them on the screen regardless of how many other people are in the frame. My favorite example of kind of like the it factor has always been Marilyn Monroe's small part in All About Eve. I mean, you have Bette Davis as the clear star of the show, and I mean, she's an undeniable megastar herself. Buckle your seatbelts, it's gonna be a bumpy night. Then you have Anne Baxter, who plays the antagonist and the rival to Davis in the film. Then you have this like super brief, somewhat inconsequential scene in the film where Addison DeWitt, played by George Sanders, himself as a side character, has brought a date to the dinner party. And there's this shot where almost the entire cast is gathered on the steps to shoot a short scene. Pretty much all the stars in the show are in the frame. But following the release of the film, the studio was flooded with letters, not about anybody else in the cast or the storyline, but people wanting to know, who's this blonde girl in the scene? Marilyn was only on camera for like a couple minutes, but she had it. Your eyes just went to her, no matter what. She was a star. I said before that when MGM claimed to have more stars than there are in the sky, it was both a fact and a strategy. I mean, names like Clark Gable, Fred Astaire, Hedy Lamarr, Katharine Hepburn. They, as well as the other studios, had learned that audiences came to see their movies for the faces. Genres, plots, directors, those things definitely matter as we talk about on this channel. But one thing that was almost guaranteed to pry customers loose of their spare change was a chance to spend time in a darkened theater with their favorite star projected 2 stories tall on the silver screen. Okay, so all my friends know that I'm known to refer to Audrey Hepburn as my wife, much to the dismay of many girlfriends in the past. But getting to spend time with your favorite star on the screen is something akin to going on a date with them, or getting to know them, or being their friend. Now, obviously none of those things are actually happening. The stars themselves don't have any clue that you even exist. But that's the magic of the movies. It can bring these larger-than-life characters directly into our lives and give us the sensation, even though temporary, that we live in the same world. I think the phrase larger-than-life with regards to movie stars is a key point to remember here, and we'll come back to that later in the essay. Audiences weren't just seeing pint-sized images of these actors on smartphone and small snippets on TikTok or some clip from TMZ. No, audiences were engaging with these faces, 2 stories tall on the movie screen in that darkened cathedral we know is a movie theater, which, by the way, only exists to focus all of our attention into this fictional world. In fact, now that we got some of that background out of the way, let's skip ahead to the moment where we start identifying some of the macroeconomic reasons why the star system that many of us grew up loving and understanding has suddenly become really a thing of the past. Let's go back to our Biograph Girl example. Her persona was invented by the studio as a way to sell tickets, a way to brand the studio, so to speak, in the eyes of the public. Moving forward to the studio system, the studio's profits were often tied to their ability to lock down the most appealing stars to long-term contracts. They weren't the free agents that we know today. They were employees of a specific studio. The studio itself handled all the press and publicity required to build them up in the public's eye. In exchange, the stars were contractually obligated to work exclusively for that studio, whenever and wherever the studio dictated, and in whatever roles and projects the studio decided. Probably one of the best examples is the point where Clark Gable for Gone with the Wind was actually loaned out from his studio for that film. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to do it. Such was the control each studio had over their own roster. And as you might expect, that studio system era is rife with stories of stars like Bette Davis, Olivia de Havilland rebelling against being forced into certain roles, and studios retaliating in court or by adding length to their 7-year contracts. The studio heads weren't stupid. They knew that it was those stars who were putting butts in the seats, and they took extraordinary measures to hold on to their own. Eventually, as the studio system began to crumble and stars gained more leverage inside of Hollywood, the power shifted. The rise of the talent agent and the freedom of the actor to choose their own roles set market conditions to where top stars could negotiate their own salaries. The public, long primed to follow movie stars by the box office, was just as hungry as ever for famous faces. So stars, understanding their worth to the financial process, started demanding higher and higher salaries. After all, if the audience is coming to see them, shouldn't they be getting paid? The system held for a long time, and gradually salaries began to climb and climb and climb. By the time we get to the late 90s, the stars' massive salary potentially destroying the studios started to really become an issue. I remember at the time I would always read both Variety and The Hollywood Reporter, cover to cover, every day just to keep up with what was happening in the town. And at a certain point during the heyday of the 2 Toms, Julia Roberts, Bruce Willis, even Jim Carrey getting $20 million a picture, it was starting to sound like a broken record with all the executives complaining about how much they were being forced to pay actors. Why should they have to pay an actor $20 million a picture? It's throwing off the studio's profit margin, and there's no guarantee that the studio will even be able to make that money back in the first place. That, of course, is the studio's argument. Whether the stars of the studio was right in that particular scenario is really a matter of opinion. I won't get too much into that, but the clear objective fact is that the studios, tired of feeling at the whim of individual talent, decided they needed to do something about it. And just like the wealth gap in this country, the result was intentional. Going back to the days of the Biograph Grill, the studios made a concerted effort to shift audience expectations. If star salaries were bleeding the studios dry, the studio would need to find a way to make the studio the star again, not the individual actor. But how do you build up movie properties without actors' faces? Simple. Put masks on them. The studio's rebuttal of high star salaries in the 90s led directly into the rise of the superhero movies in the 2000s. Kind of tiptoeing into the genre in 2002 with Spider-Man franchise, then skyrocketing with the arrival of Marvel and the first Iron Man movie in 2008. The studios suddenly found their secret bullet to kill off any expensive star system was the movie franchise. Whether it was superheroes, just endless sequels to previously loved characters, studios shifted from being about developing stars to developing IP. The Marvel franchise wasn't about the individual actors. The Marvel franchise was about Marvel. With all due respect to the talented actors who donned the capes for Marvel over the years, there have been plenty of them, the studio is well aware that they can put almost anyone behind that suit and still end up with an Avengers film at the end of the day. Sure, the character shading might be a little different, but those are hardly vehicles driven by an actor's performance. The asset on sale there is Marvel IP, not stars. As Marvel just bred more superheroes, and there was a mind-numbing number of just sequels to action franchises, as all that began to dominate the market, it pushed out essentially every other genre of film. I mean, if you're a producer, why make a mid-level adult drama with a star whose salary is going to consume half the film's budget? We can just pump money into proven IP, cast whatever actor will work cheapest, and shove content into theaters that may not actually be any good, but it's proven that people actually go and pay ticket price for it. Had Iron Man not been a hit, or this era been just a blip on the radar, the dominance of the movie star may have still thrived. But 2 straight decades of training the movie audience, especially like younger viewers who are new to the experience, to think of movies as just being extensions of existing IP, rather than a chance to see their favorite movie stars on the big screen, permanently alter the way movie stars are positioned within society. This, in turn, changed the type of movies an actor could even do. It used to be you're going to see a Tom Hanks movie. That might be a war movie, that might be a romantic comedy, it could be a social drama. The driving factor was that Tom Hanks was in it. He was a great actor, and his putting his name and stamp of approval on the project by taking on the lead lent each project a certain amount of weight in the ticket buyer's mind. So Hanks could choose the parts that led to building a diverse and extended career. Compare that to someone like Chris Evans. I'm not saying that Chris Evans is the new Tom Hanks, but I think we can all agree that Chris Evans is capable of more as an actor than just playing Captain America again and again. Yet, unless there's some kind of late career course correction, his entire legacy will mostly be remembered for his time in the superhero suit. A superhero that audiences don't even really connect with him necessarily as an actor. He's just the current person inhabiting a Marvel character. But the prevalence of superhero movies isn't the only thing that's changed the fate of the movie star in the recent decades. In the last quarter century, the rise of franchise and IP, along with the studio's concerted efforts to reduce the power of the movie star, has coincided with an even more earth-shaking development in the history of society: the birth and growth of social media. When we look at the few remaining movie stars left today, people who still open a movie think Denzel, Brad Pitt, Tom Cruise. It's not accidental that these men are all in their 60s or 70s. They've been around a long time, long enough to have become famous before the days of social media. Their fame wasn't based on an algorithm or a carefully timed viral post. Their relationship with the audience was built year upon year, decade upon decade, on performances on the big screen. Each of those 3 men I mentioned benefited from the kind of pre-IP marketplace, where they could explore a wide variety of roles while audiences formed this kind of parasocial relationship with them that could last a lifetime. I think it's important to state that this essay is not meant to disparage the current crop of would-be stars. There are just as many amazing actors today as there ever were. Rather, I hope what you're noticing in this argument is how shifts in the market itself have dramatically altered the playing field on which those actors are asked to play. I think someone like Timothée Chalamet or Zendaya or Sydney Sweeney, shout out, by the way, to whoever the casting director was on Euphoria, they did a bang-up job. But I think those people would have had a good shot at becoming stars really in any era. And I think had they been around in the 80s and 90s, they would have been even bigger stars than they are today. So it's not as much a question about talent as it is about timing. Greta Garbo has remained one of the most famous names for nearly 100 years, despite making every effort to stay out of the public eye. She became famous for being unknowable, untouchable. It was so rare for the public to see behind the on-screen facade that the entire marketing campaign around her first comedy, Ninochka, was built around the tagline, "Garbo laughs." It was such a rare thing to see, nobody thought it could actually happen. But there's a reason why you probably still know her name, even though you may have never actually seen one of her films. I mentioned at the top of this essay that movie stars occupy rarefied air. They're not meant to be like you or me. They're meant to be these celestial beings that somehow exist in this magic world we call the movies. I made a point earlier of mentioning how early audiences only interacted with their movie stars when they saw them 2 stories high on the silver screen. You have to remember that during much of that studio system, while these names that we all know were being built up, there was literally no other way for you to see a movie star than to go to them, see them at the local Cineplex, or just local movie theater. There weren't really Cineplexes back then. There was no social media, there was no streaming, there was no home video. It wasn't really even television for the early part of that. So if you wanted to spend an hour and a half with Cary Grant, the only way you were going to do that is by buying a ticket and going to the movies. And the only way you were going to actually see him at all really was projected on this huge screen where he lived larger than life. Perhaps you could learn a little bit about the man by picking up one of the heavily curated tabloid magazines where stories were planted by the studio just to further cement a star's movie persona. But for the most part, the only access to a movie star in those days you had was through the characters they played on screen. Let's compare that to today. Social media is the billboard of the modern age. It is the fame vehicle. It is the way you reach an audience. Traditional media still exists, but social media is where the world currently resides. And with younger generations not knowing a world without social media is going to become more and more prevalent in our lives rather than less. I'll save my old man rant about that for later because social media is in fact here to stay. So let's talk about the world we live in now. This has massively altered both how we consume media as well as how a movie star's public persona is built. I heard an interview with Denzel recently where he was saying that he encourages younger actors he works with to get off of social media. His point being that when you're competing for roles based on your follower count rather than your acting ability, something has gone wildly wrong. And while I absolutely agree with him on that point, the story is quite complicated. Of course, he's speaking as someone who had the chance to make his name prior to social media. In the current environment where everything lives in your social media feed, it's next to impossible, or at least it seems to be, to have any kind of breakthrough without a strong social media presence. Social media provides an outlet for artists to display their craft and display their talent, but it's also become something of a requirement for any public-facing professional pursuit. I can't tell you how many projects I've been working on, where I was forced to cast someone specifically because they had a large following on Instagram or TikTok. The logic being that an actor or a model will bring that audience with them to the box office and thus boost ticket sales. The onus has shifted from the studio building up the Biograph girl to the modern day Biograph girl actually needing to build up her own audience and then bring that to build up the studio. I mentioned earlier that Timothée Chalamet seems like the type of actor that could have broken out regardless of the era into which he was born. But one of the main reasons he's probably the best known of the younger generations is that, aside from being a terrific actor, he is also like just an absolute ace at playing the game of social media. And that kind of self-sufficiency is key to gaining any kind of traction in today's marketplace. But let's also consider the flip side of that. As we discussed with Garbo, part of a movie star's appeal is scarcity. They seem to be these elusive characters that live in a different world than our own. Social media, by comparison, demands that you be posting constantly. Even the most mundane moments of your life need to be shared with the entire world. Every thought, every opinion, every sandwich you eat for lunch is deemed worthy of at least an Instagram story. In such an environment, how is a star supposed to build up an aura of mystique? It's like when two people are in a relationship and one's kind of smothering the other one. And so that one will say to them, you have to give me a chance to miss you. Being ever present is great for building social media, but it's not at all conducive to forming the kind of hierarchical relationship with your audience. Now, am I saying that a movie star is better than anybody else on the street? No, absolutely not. They're the same schmucks as the rest of us, just with better clothes. But should a movie star seem to be better than the rest of us, or at least in a different world than the rest of us, somewhat removed? Well, that is a different thing altogether. Building up the aura or the mystique around a movie star means, to some degree, limiting access to that movie star. The social media thrives on nonstop access. An artist's stardom shouldn't really have anything to do with their ability to build a following on social media, yet social media is the billboard of our time, as I said, making it hard to grow fame without it. Add to this the changing reality of fame. I mentioned my definition of fame earlier. Fame is when everyone knows your name, even if they've never actually seen your work. It's global in its reach, enduring in its nature. Your notoriety gets passed down through generations. In a social media-driven world where everyone is out to develop their own individual audience, and visibility is really determined more by computer algorithms rather than human gatekeepers, We're all closer to our 15 minutes of fame than ever, but at the same time, we're all further away from any ability to actually make a lasting impression. One could argue that the modern star is the social media influencer. They did a recent study that found that more people under the age of 18, younger folks, these days are having dreams of becoming YouTube stars rather than movie stars. Just further proof of the prevalence of social media and where the market is headed. But in this, we also coalesce around a final reason why stars no longer exist in the way that they once did. There are some truly huge channels on a platform like YouTube, millions of followers. By any measure, that is a success. But the weird thing about the current market is that someone can have those millions of followers and still not really be famous. I mean, sure, to their followers, they're famous, they're celebrities. But unless my own YouTube algorithm serves me up their content, there's a high likelihood that I'll never even have heard of them. Our example earlier of Tom Cruise's name being ubiquitous, whether you've seen his movies or not, doesn't really hold in an algorithm-driven society. People are famous in pockets now. But achieving that same kind of global fame where everyone knows your name regardless of their walk of life, that just feels nearly impossible. Add to that the medium itself diminishes the message. With theatrical numbers declining and an ever-increasing number of platforms on which to consume content, from social media to streaming services, the majority of media consumption these days is done via a digital device. If you subscribe to Netflix, for example, you can watch that same movie you just saw in the theater now on your home TV, or your tablet, your laptop, or most notably, your phone. From a filmmaker standpoint, the idea of someone watching like Lawrence of Arabia on a cell phone screen that's just depressing. But it's more than just screen size. Because it's just the norm now to watch movies on the same device that you use to text your friends or scan TikTok or Instagram and check out clips from YouTube, the world is subconsciously leading your mind to equate movie stars with social media stars. I'm not trying to denigrate social media stars, as I just explained. That is the medium of the future. But whereas movie stars used to occupy this kind of rarefied air that you could only spend time with them 2 stories tall on the big screen, you now have access to them 24 hours a day on your device. You get served up clips from their movies in your feed, sandwiched between your friend's cooking video and another friend's post about their trip to Alaska. Mentally, your brain starts to equate the finely honed performance built on decades of training and produced in front of some of Hollywood's best craftsmen in the world with that selfie your Aunt Linda shot on her cell phone at the local fair. Again, I'm not suggesting that one should be more important than the other. What I am saying is that the movie star system is based on the perception of social hierarchy and scarcity. It could definitely be argued that we're actually better off now with a more egalitarian society without hierarchy. But our movie stars, our heroes up on the screen, have always been aspirational. They are supposed to be somewhat set apart. That's what allows the human psyche to form that kind of parasocial relationship with them in the first place. When the actor you just saw in a movie is also the same guy you just saw doing the water bottle challenge on TikTok, and then saw him in some streaming series on Peacock, and saw him hosting his own YouTube podcast, it makes it hard to revere him in the same way that you once did when you only see him a couple times a year, 2 stories tall. Yeah, even though it might be true, it's still kind of like hard to wrap your head around the idea of like Humphrey Bogart doing a vertical TikTok video, but this is the modern age, and just like it was back then, actors do whatever actors need to do to survive. So what's the solution? In many ways, the shift in the current marketplace has made it easier than ever to access an audience. Part of me has always kind of like dreamt of being Siskel and Ebert, for example, when I was a kid, but that was always going to be a long shot. With YouTube, all I have to do is hit upload and boom, I have my own show. So in that way, it's definitely cool. The studio system also came with gatekeepers. To get to be one of those chosen few, you had to run a very specific gauntlet. If you didn't pass muster with a very specific set of tastemakers, you had no chance to reach the marketplace, no matter how much talent you had. And that's definitely not fair. The digital world, it removes that barrier. You are your own gatekeeper. But the trade-off with that is that we lose some of our ability to get lost in the fantasy. When we have 24-hour access to our stars, we don't have time to build up the scarcity necessary to build up our own vision of them in our head. And having to perform daily for the algorithm is equally, if not more, detrimental to a performance career than being boxed in by the studio system. The most enduring stars have gotten that way by building a career on diverse roles across a long and varied career. They've represented us on screen, while also somehow standing apart and existing in this kind of space in our imagination. The entire existence of movie stars, like all else in the world, was always a function of capitalism, a way to help drive ticket sales. The growth of the movie star fueled the growth of the movies. The demise of the movie star has also been a function of capitalism, a need to put the stars back in their place. the desire to force the growth of IP as a replacement for the star system, the development of new technology that has deluged us with an onslaught of content that has ripped us away from any sense of mystery surrounding our performers. And the growth of the content creator has created new parasocial relationships that allow audiences to access their favorite stars without ever having to buy a ticket. Will the old movie star system ever really return? Maybe, to a degree. But I don't know that we are ever set for a full return to the days of having more stars than there are in the sky. I think the new movie stars are going to be those stars that are self-generated on social media platforms, that have larger visions for their careers. Those social media stars whose passions lie with cinema, but they can then leverage their popularity on those platforms to get better movies made. Remember, stars only became stars because their faces could sell tickets. If actors in the social media era can successfully translate their ability to build an audience on social media platforms to building a ticket-buying audience for the films that they are in, then we might have a chance. And if we give that same artist the benefit of the doubt that they actually have the goods as an actor beyond just their ability to create social media content, I think there may be a room to create a new definition of a movie star. Still aspirational, still having it, whatever it is, but built for a new generation of moviegoers with the power to reach audiences the world over. At least I hope so. Thanks again for watching another episode of Movable Canvas. If you like this kind of material, please do remember to hit the like and subscribe buttons below. That really helps out the channel. I try to post a new video about once a month where we talk about the best Hollywood and the rest of the world have to offer. And I'd love to hear your thoughts, particularly on this issue. These are just my reasons why I think the star system has been faltering as of late. But what do you think it is? Why don't we regard movie stars today in the way we once did? Does someone like Timothée Chalamet have the goods to still be around 40 years from now in the way the stars like Brad Pitt or Leonardo DiCaprio have maintained? Or are there other names I should be keeping an eye on? I'd love to hear what you have to say in the comments. But until then, thanks for watching and have a great day.